The Bollinger family. After Natalie died, they slandered my name repeatedly. This slander resulted in many people harming me, but it wasn't just the Bollinger family. It was also the media. It was also the police. I spoke out about what the police in Boulder do for years and years and years. I'm disabled, not stupid. The problem is that the things that these people were doing, the police just outright refused to take a look at. Every hospital that I was in, every jail that I was in, I tried to get the police to take a report. I tried to get them to give me the paperwork so I could fill it out. But I didn't have access to the evidence. I saved that evidence so that I could write down my report with times and dates and names. When I'm stressed out, the first thing I forget is names and dates. I remember the events. But the police would not allow that. The hospitals would not allow that. They kept on refusing to take a look, refusing to allow me to have access to it. Without a safe environment, that's housing first. Housing first. I can't do the things that they asked me to do without housing and an income. Both of the things that were taken away from me because Natalie died. That should not have happened. This was because of assumed guilt. The way that the homeless, especially the disabled homeless, are treated in the United States is sickening. They're used as jail filler. There are many examples of this. There's a guy named Chris, he's schizophrenic. And he's now got assisted living. But for a lot of years, he was out there homeless, being victimized. With the professionals who were supposed to help to protect me from the things that happened. People like Jeff Ritter, Kara Heller, and Jen Beebe after Natalie's death. But these people don't do what it is that you think they do. See, they can diagnose you with something without looking at the evidence, and that's allowed in court. But then they say, well, we can't help you in court. We have no say-so. No, you really do. And that's why you need to take a look. See, I shouldn't have had to go to a bunch of therapists for something the police should have done something about. The police need to do something about the abuse against a disabled person. These therapists didn't do anything about that. They didn't do anything about the financial situation that I was forced into, or the fact that I was forced into a situation where I went from having housing, where I had a roof over my head, to a situation where the public hated me because of slander, and I was cast out into public to be ostracized and abused. What the Bollingers did, I saved evidence of, but getting the police to actually look at that evidence has been impossible. Without family help, without people actually standing up for my rights were trampled. My constitutional rights were trampled. Hundreds of threats against my life. Hundreds of people involved in trying to shut out my voice and prevent me from speaking, prevent me from my First Amendment right, freedom of speech. prevent me from showing evidence, prevent me from even showing up in court. What the Bollingers did was wrong, but it's somehow magically okay if you don't take a look. And it's been difficult to show people what's going on with all of these people who hate me, constantly bombarding my Facebook, or preventing me from being able to even get to the police. And police going out of their way not to take a report. I should have been allowed ample time to sit down with evidence and an investigator to show what was going on. But I had to be afraid of the police, like most homeless people. The things that happen to me happen to many others who don't have family support. I am severely mentally damaged from the things that happen to me. For all these people who helped me financially or with a roof over my head, well, it sucks because those finances didn't get the police to take a look. Those finances weren't enough to cover my daily needs, let alone have enough money to go traveling around to all the places that I needed to go to defend myself, not to be allowed to defend myself. Now, there's a lot of witnesses like Steve Tomlinson, Mateo Talbot, Kayla Trujillo. These people are witnesses. These are witnesses that should have been listened to. And that's what's wrong with America. When the police do wrong, when the police violate your constitutional rights, they can still railroad you just by not allowing that information, by not allowing the truth, by omitting the truth or stealing the truth, by looking away or punishing you and incarcerating you until it's no longer relevant according to the law because the statute of limitations is over. All they had to do was drag it out until the statute of limitations was over. They get to do whatever they want. By taking me out of jurisdiction and separating me from that evidence, preventing me from making a report, which they did so repeatedly, they screwed me. If I'd have had housing first, I'd have been able to sit down in an environment that was my own, instead of having to jump through hoops for people when I'm already overwhelmed with everything that I need to do. I'm already feeling terrible because I'm needing their help. And then there's the help that they offered. And when they don't fulfill their end of the deal, they always throw it in my face. They put a roof over my head and food in my belly. I shouldn't have needed that, and that's a fact. I shouldn't have had to go to a bunch of people who are not trained for this. But who is? Who is trained for this? The police in Broomfield, I let them know that if I'm rushed, it shuts me down. If I'm threatened, it shuts me down. If I'm being yelled at, it shuts me down. When my friends die, it shuts me down. When I can't see my loved ones, it shuts me down. And the police took complete advantage of this. When I'm shut down, I don't have good communication skills. When I have to type it out, my communication skills are even worse, especially on a telephone. Now, if I have time, if I'm not constantly being rushed and bombarded, and I can actually sit down and work on those things, then I can type it out just fine. But without a positive environment, housing first, I can't do that. For 2 years, I've been in other people's houses, other people's living situations. And that's difficult for me. It puts a strain on me and it puts a strain on them. For most of these people, it was an extremely stressful situation for me because of all the screaming. But I can't say that or they get angry at me. It's too loud. Shannon Alvarado, it was too loud. Tabitha, it was too loud. Rihanna, it was too loud. Another thing to note is that in most of these places, there were people who were abusive in a fashion that really puts me through PTSD because of the people that I dealt with growing up and as an adult. Being stuck on the streets, as well as having two parents that are addicts, it's difficult. Because I know how people act and react when they're on substances, and it's not very nice. When I'm frustrated and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, it's because I need help. I need someone to actually listen to me instead of treat me like I'm hallucinating every damn thing. Because I didn't hallucinate it. I saved the evidence for a reason. There's a reason that I was trying to go to the police. And the more I tried to go to the police, the more I was abused, charged with crimes for them doing things that I warned them not to. Don't put drugs in me. They don't work right. And I told every mental health care professional that. Don't put drugs in me. I needed to be heard, not drugged. I needed housing, not institutionalized. I needed to be protected, not victimized. And that's the problem, is that without family, without somebody in your corner willing to fucking take charge and say, hey, this is fucked up, we're gonna do something about it, you just fall through the cracks. And I've fallen through the cracks my entire life. I didn't expect my mom to help. My mom's been playing victim for years. That's because she stole my money and I broke a bunch of glass in her house. She wasn't expecting my stepdad to be home. I'd just paid her money for rent the day before, and she played like she didn't even know I was there. Oh, well, I didn't know that Sean was squatting in our old house. Yeah, you did. I needed housing first. When Natalie disappeared, I shouldn't have been thrown around like a chicken with my head cut off. Being thrown out there for every vigilante in Colorado to put their nasty cockbeaters on me. I'm intelligent. That doesn't mean I don't get overwhelmed. And you know what? When I shut down because I was overwhelmed, I was abused for it, which made me even more overwhelmed, which created even more communication issues. What Natalie and her family did in Virginia in 2016, there's no cause or reason for that. I mean, it's obvious that I'm disabled. It's obvious that I'm overwhelmed. It's obvious that I don't communicate well when I'm overwhelmed. And the more overwhelmed I am, the more I scream for help. But then when I'm screaming for help, I get treated like I'm a terrible person because I'm breaking the law now. I shouldn't have to break the law. When I went in calmly to talk to people, they brushed me off or talked over me. That's why I scream. In most of the environments that I was in, I literally needed help. I needed someone to listen. In the jails, hundreds of inmates saw what was happening to me. Hundreds of inmates saw the police harassing me and threatening me and picking on me, teasing me. With Officer McRae, when she put me on suicide watch. I wasn't suicidal. I was trying to get a police officer there. Or I wasn't trying to commit suicide, rather, and I hadn't said anything about killing myself. I was just trying to get an officer there. An officer there because I needed to make a report about her in specific. That was Officer McRae, Officer Thorne, and Officer Peterson. Not the same Officer Peterson that was in Natalie's case. This was a deputy at the jail. When I went to the police here in Virginia not too long ago, in Wyoming, in Washington State, in Colorado, in Nebraska, I was blown off or told they can't do anything. I called hundreds of numbers. I probably made thousands of calls to the FBI, to different mental health places, but without the resources to go to those places, what are you expecting from me? I was railroaded in court because nobody would look at the evidence. I needed a professional to look at that evidence. Of course, I'm rambling because I'm fucking overwhelmed. And then that's used to pretend like I'm hallucinating things or making things up. And then you get a diagnosis based on the fact that the doctors didn't look. Why was I sent to doctors? Because the police didn't want to do their jobs. It's obvious that if I'm trying to talk to the police about an issue, I'm choosing not to commit suicide. I am choosing life. I am choosing to hope that this once the police are actually going to listen and look at the evidence. It got to the point where before going to the police, I told what I was doing and what my intent was before going in. Because police kept turning off their body cameras and omitting evidence without me having the ability to have evidence taken and looked at, without being allowed to make a written report and actually have it investigated. People can do whatever they want to me. They've done it my entire life. From Phil McPhee stealing my rent, I ended up homeless because of that, to Lana and Sammy and Shelly making empty promises for me to buy Sammy and Shelly's house. You know, Sammy and Shelly actually were honest with me about that place. And I was honest with them. I didn't have the money. Lana and Amanda wanted to move up to Montana with them. And they offered to send me money every month because there was a lot of animals there that they were basically dumping on me. And I took care of those animals, and I found homes for those animals. But when I'm frustrated, I seriously need help. I seriously need somebody to not blow me off and tell me to do other things. No, I know what works and I know what doesn't. I've been me for my entire life. Doctors need to listen. The police need to listen. But without somebody going in with me in person, they can do whatever they want. They can omit information. They can omit evidence. They can refuse to look at evidence. They can steal evidence. And without somebody there with me, there's no witness. It's just their word against mine, and I've been labeled as mentally ill. I had court dates that I wasn't allowed to go to, was prevented from going to. And the outcome of those court dates that I was not allowed to go to because lawyers didn't do their jobs, public pretenders like Pamela Cardi did not do their jobs. Pamela Cardi isn't the only one. When you're homeless, you don't get representation. When I tried telling my lawyers what was going on, they kept on cutting me off and telling me it's not in that jurisdiction, so it can't be entered in as evidence. Meanwhile, the prosecution and the police can steal evidence from other jurisdictions to prevent it from being shown. And they can show evidence from other jurisdictions or allow slander from other jurisdictions or even other states to prevent me from having an honest day in court. For me, being in a hostile situation where I'm surrounded by police officers and I've been trying to get these police officers to listen to what I've been telling them, I've been abused. I've been abused and I need help stopping the abuse. But without somebody there with me, especially since officers abused me, yeah, they're not likely to listen. I needed an autism advocate, somebody who specializes in sensory overload issues. And you know, somebody who specializes in PTSD would be just as good. But I didn't have the resources to go to all of these places. People didn't send me a $5,000 chunk of cash right when Natalie died, like they did with the Bollingers. Those GoFundMes that were set up, I didn't get a single dollar from any of them. And people with a history of lying to me, of being dishonest, of misleading the truth, I had to depend on these people, knowing that they have a history of doing that, but I had nowhere else to go. I needed a safe environment in Colorado as soon as I was assaulted by Officer Lolatai. With each and every one of these situations where I was institutionalized, where I was at the end of my ropes, with each and every one of those situations, I shouldn't have been in it. With each and every one of those situations, there was multiple attempts where I tried to talk to the police in a calm and efficient manner and was blown off. I was being abused and no police officer took a report about that abuse. No officer allowed me the time or space to do that. And that's the thing about homelessness, is that I'm suffering from sensory overload. I've got too much going on in my environment. I need a quiet place to sit down and do that and not be afraid that I'm going to be victimized for trying. I've made a lot of phone calls since I've been here in Virginia. Housing first. I shouldn't have had to expose Rick and Shannon's arguments. That's none of my business. That's not the rest of the world's business. But the fact is, this became very public. And the public needs to know the things that we go through as homeless people, as people who are considered mentally ill. The things that happen to me are not acceptable. But they don't just happen to me. They happen to many other people. But many of these other people got help because they weren't pegged. They weren't pegged as stalkers, rapists, child molesters, and murderers. Meanwhile, the people who did those things, I have evidence that they did those things, and the police turn a blind eye to this child abuse. I have to be afraid to tell the police that a child is being abused because, first of all, historically, they don't listen. Also, I'm in an environment in most of these places where I have to get help. These people promised me help. And the environment that I would be put into without that help, by turning in those people for what they did to those children, would put myself at risk and could put those children at further risk. Going public with the names of victims and their predators. That makes it so that at least if I'm locked up and something happens to these people, they'll know where to look. Ted is a very dangerous man. He does drugs and has access to guns, and unlike me, he carries them. So, for Miss Shelley to protect herself and her children, yeah, she has to pretend I'm the bad guy. The fact is, Miss Shelley was going to help me. Danica was going to help me. All of this could have ended just by police in Chesapeake, Virginia, sitting down with me and Natalie. Or me and Natalie and her family. What happened instead is not right. It's not acceptable. It's not something that a disabled person should have to go through. It's not something any person should go through, whether or not they're disabled. And after the things that happened to me, yeah, I'm on edge all the time. And people who are not professionals should not have to deal with me. The people whose houses that I've been in, they've been far more abusive verbally than I have. I have to bottle it up because I'm in a subservient position. Housing first. If I'd have had housing when Natalie disappeared, instead of having it taken away from me, if I'd have had an income when Natalie disappeared, instead of it being taken away from me, having to be spent to go somewhere where there are less likelihood of vigilantes, that's difficult. People kept telling me go to the library while I was in Boulder. I can't go to the library because the way I was painted, a lot of people hated me, and a lot of people were very physical about their hatred towards me. I had to be afraid to go to the police. Afraid to go to the police. That's why I needed someone to go in with me. I already knew what they would do if nobody went in with me. They've done it to hundreds of people that I know. Hundreds of people that I know. When you go in to talk to a police officer, you need somebody there with you in person, in the room with you. If nothing else, to witness what's going on. To witness that you actually tried to tell them what's going on. And if they omit information on their police reports, not mine, I didn't get to write them. If they get information on those police reports where they didn't write down what it is that I had to say, or they omit the fact that I was being abused, or the fact that I was trying to tell on police officers. If they omit that information, at least there's a witness. My disabilities were exploited from day one. Having a disabled person cast out into public to be abused, well, that's unacceptable. I had to break the law to defend myself, to try to get attention. Not attention for attention's sake because I seek attention, but because there is a major problem. A major problem. After I hurt my back in 2015, I should have had help. I changed a lot since then. I had to. Housing first. None of these mental health care professionals or law enforcement officers should have been turning a blind eye to the abuses against me, or using my intelligence as an excuse why I deserved it, using my intelligence to pretend that I'm not disabled. I have so many thoughts running through my head all at once, all the time, because I don't have a positive environment. I don't have my own place where it's quiet, where I can just sit down and work on what I need to. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm having a severe panic attack because I can't work on those things, I'm not getting any sleep. and that affects my mental well-being. I've been in a constant state of fear, petrified and terrified for the last 3 years. 3 years of this. Yes, that does damage to your brain. I'm disabled. I'm not a predator. I'm not some evil animal. And I needed help. What I got for asking for help was abused and treated like I deserved it. I needed housing. I needed housing before I could set up appointments and get established and establish a routine. Something that's been prevented. My disabilities were exploited to their fullest. The things that I told Officer Jai Rogers and Detective Mark Peterson, the things that I told them so that they could get effective communication out of me, was exploited to prevent me from being able to communicate effectively. I try my best, but I have non-stop panic attacks. You can't tell right now that I'm having a panic attack, can you? But a panic attack is a lot different than having a meltdown. I mean, it's more than just anxiety. I have anxiety attacks too. And they're non-stop. The panic attacks are nearly non-stop, and I'm always trying to fight off a meltdown because of the abuse that I've endured and the abuse that I will continue to endure for the rest of my life if I can't get someone to take a look at this evidence. If I can't get the evidence back that the police have taken. Nearly every officer who stole my evidence, I told them that I was trying to turn in police officers. That shows motive for them not doing their jobs. And many of these mental health care professionals, like the ones at Clearview, had to go along because they didn't want to lose their jobs. And there's plenty of examples of this, both in the police and the medical fields. You know, Officer William Barr, that's the guy who married Jessica Martindale from Chapel, Nebraska. He lost his job for being a whistleblower. He lost his job as a police officer for turning in a police officer who is actually stalking someone. I was trying to get help. I tried going to the source to get them to end it. They just treated me like shit. That was Natalie, Alicia, and Maddie. I tried going to my friends who just blew me off and blew me off and blew me off. I'm trying to get them to communicate with me in a way that's effective, and obviously texting is not an effective way to do it. They go out of their way to twist things into something that it's not. But you know what? I give them examples. There's a big difference between you taking something wrong and me actually doing those things. So if you're going to accuse me of doing those things, don't be pissed off when I do it. Like David and Betsy Prowell slandering my name on my Facebook, instead of speaking to me like a human being. And Dan Fabert slandering my name on my Facebook, instead of finding out from me what was going on, instead of finding out both sides. It's not okay. Miss Peaches took a lot of stuff wrong, but she admitted that she took it wrong. And she was apologetic for it. And there's people that, well, like Dylan Bauer. I never expected Dylan Bauer, especially back in high school, with as big a jerk as he was. I never expected Dylan Bauer to offer me help, but he did. After Natalie died and I lost that phone, with that evidence of me and Danica's conversations, me and Shelly's conversations, and the things that Lana and Amanda did, the cruelty that they put me through, the meanness that they put me through when I left there, because of autistic traits that are more prevalent in abusive situations, autistic traits that are more prevalent when we're not allowed to speak, autistic traits that are more prevalent when you're in a loud environment. Lana and Amanda's wasn't that bad. It's the fact that under the amount of stress that I was under, with Lana snapping at me for things like not buying Bradley Dollinger's car, which I didn't have the money for, and snapping at me every morning, not necessarily even me in the morning. She'd just be snappy in the morning, and that shuts me down. If I'd have had housing, that's not something that would have happened. I'd have had my own environment, like I did at Ken and Leah's garage, like I had at Low Income in Chapel, Nebraska. People keep saying I just need to let it go. The problem is I can't see my loved ones. Most of them are pissed off because I exposed their secrets. I didn't want to expose their secrets. I wanted them to tell the truth. I wanted them to come forward about the fact that I tried to get their help, and they fell through, even after saying that they would help. Many of these people may not have had bad intentions, but the fact is the results of their actions had a bearing on me. People say I chose this. Well, you know what? If that's the case, then Danica chose this. Shelly chose this. Peaches chose this. Derek chose this. Joanna chose this. The police chose this. Fair and equal treatment under the Constitution of the United States, that's what I'm after. But the Constitution doesn't apply to the police. They can do whatever they want. And the Constitution does not apply to the homeless. They can be victimized by anybody who chooses because of public opinion. And that's a fact. Public opinion was used to railroad me and prevent me from having an honest day in court. Witnesses should have been subpoenaed. My lawyers should have showed up to their appointments. Their investigators should have shown up to those appointments. I had to go to places where I was being assaulted by the general public in order to go to those meetings, in order to go meet my public pretender, in order to go meet their investigators. And it cost me money to travel to these places where I was unsafe. And it cost me money to travel away from those places. I could not financially afford the cost of being falsely accused. And being railroaded in court dates that I wasn't allowed to go to is not okay. Having failure to appears because I was incarcerated, that's fucked up, because my public pretender, very specifically Pamela Carty, it was her job to notify these places that I couldn't make it, to notify these people in these other jurisdictions that I was incarcerated. And therefore, because I was incarcerated at the time of those court dates, I was not failing to appear. I was prevented from doing so. The mental anguish that I had to endure because she didn't do her job just added to the stress. I needed housing first. Many of the things that I've been asked to do, I'm incapable of doing. But many of those things I would have been capable of doing if I'd have had housing first. The cost of going to these meetings and court dates, for them just to be prolonged and set out for another month and another month and another month. Every month I'm expending all of my disability money, all of the money that I need to spend in order to put a roof over my head and do the things that are asked of me. Housing first. Not victimization because I don't have it. Not victimization because I can't handle the way that I'm treated. I'm overwhelmed. I needed people to stop talking over me, stop yelling at me, stop telling me to do things I don't have the ability to do. And stop telling me to call services that aren't doing anything. The FBI did nothing. The Attorney Generals did nothing. But the fact is, I wasn't able to sit down in a place where I could actually do the things that I needed to do in order to get that information to the Attorney Generals, to a lawyer. And with the police stealing as much as they could, how am I supposed to be able to show it now? Even if I got housing today, the computer taken by the Wyoming Police Department that shows the wrongdoing of not only those officers, but also the fact that they were covering up for the wrongdoing of officers in other jurisdictions by stealing that evidence and sending it to the very officers that I was trying to report against. Sending it to the very departments that had abused me. In addition to ignoring the fact that I was letting them know that there was evidence of child abuse in my vehicle, and they had it towed anyway. They ignored that. Luckily, I was able to get some of that information out of there. I was able to get my computer out of there. It shows the abuse against myself as well, but there's other things that I need to get. And I need to be in an environment where I'm not stressed out and where I'm not stressing others out, because then they stress me out.